Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to try to take philosophy out of the textbook, make it actually useful for our lives.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that because that's kind of what's so cool about this source material.
Really?
Yeah, it's like shockingly relatable.
Interesting.
Bringing ancient philosophy like right into our modern world and making these kind of crazy connections.
So true. Like, who would have thought that like the ancient Greek Stoa, which is basically just like a hangout spot for philosophers back in the day,
Right.
had anything in common with like, say, the stoop kid from Hey Arnold?
I love that analogy.
Right.
It's so true, though. It really gets to the heart of it. Like, you don't have to be, in some stuffy classroom to think about philosophy.
Exactly.
It can happen anywhere.
Exactly. And speaking of finding philosophy in unexpected places, the source material talks about COVID lockdown.
Oh,
which really resonated with me.
The park.
The park, yeah.
Turning it into their own personal open-air gym.
Exactly. Like, talk about Stoic resourcefulness, right?
Was
finding joy and purpose in the middle of a global pandemic.
Yeah.
And it just reminded me so much of how the ancient Greeks, they really valued those public spaces for discourse.
Absolutely. And for connection, too.
Yes.
Which is a huge part of it.
Totally. Okay, so let's get into it. Like, what makes this philosophy practical?
Right.
Because let's face it, sometimes philosophy can feel a little like, abstract.
Totally. A little heady.
Heady, yes. So how do we actually use these like ancient ideas in our modern lives?
Well, I think that's the question, right? And I think for the Stoics, it wasn't just an intellectual pursuit. It was really a way of life.
I like that.
It was about action.
Yeah.
Cultivating virtue.
So then with this idea of virtue, the source material talks about this demigod ideal.
Right.
And I got to be honest, when I read that, I was like,
well, it sounds intimidating at first.
Okay.
The demigod ideal. It's this really powerful concept, though, and it speaks to that Stoic emphasis on physical strength, mental strength, pushing yourself beyond your comfort zone to really reach your full potential.
Okay, so I'm with you so far, but then it talks about like walking 50 miles a day and eating like 20 pounds of meat.
Right.
I mean, how is anybody supposed to live up to that?
And I think that's where the nuance comes in.
Okay.
I don't think it's about literally, becoming a demigod.
Right.
But embodying those qualities, strength, resilience, discipline, in our own lives.
Right.
So it's about setting ambitious goals and pushing ourselves to achieve them both physically and mentally.
So it's more about the journey than the destination.
Exactly.
It's about the process of striving to like see what we're capable of.
Yeah, pushing your limits.
Okay, I like that.
Discovering what you're truly capable of.
I like that a lot. And, that kind of leads us to another big theme here, which is conquering fear.
Absolutely.
I mean, isn't that something that we're all dealing with on a daily basis in one way or another?
On some level, yes, absolutely. Fear is a natural human emotion, but the Stoics believed we don't have to be ruled by it.
Okay.
And in fact, they developed all these techniques to manage that fear and prevent it from paralyzing us, and keeping us from living our fullest lives.
Okay, I like that a lot. And, the source uses a very relatable example of like street photography. Like that fear of approaching a stranger and like the potential rejection.
Oh, yeah.
Can be really intimidating.
For sure.
But the source points out that it's when we do overcome that fear and we step outside of our comfort zones that we often experience the most growth creatively and personally.
Absolutely.
It's like feel the fear and do it anyway. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think sometimes just naming it, just acknowledging like, okay, this is a fear that I have. This is what's holding me back sometimes. That can be so powerful in and of itself.
I like that. And speaking of facing things head on, this source material does not shy away from some hot button topics like freedom of speech.
Right.
It makes a pretty bold claim.
Yeah. It does. It says that essentially modern media contracts are a form of slavery.
It's a lot.
It is a strong statement.
It is. But it's also something that feels very relevant right now.
Sure.
In a world where it seems like everybody is terrified to say the wrong thing.
Yeah, for sure.
So it really does beg the question of, who controls the narratives that we're all consuming.
Right.
And what happens when somebody does speak out against that?
And whose voices are we not hearing?
Yes, 100%.
Because they have been silenced.
And, they use the example of Kanye West, who has faced some pretty extreme consequences
Absolutely.
for speaking his truth.
Yeah. And, whatever you think about what he's saying and his methods, the fact is there have been consequences for him.
And for sure.
Expressing his views publicly.
100%. And I think that's a perfect place to stop for part 1 of this deep dive.
And one of the things that really struck me about this source material is how it challenges conventional thinking at almost every turn.
Absolutely.
Like really shakes things up.
It does. Like this idea that modern society is antisocial and cowardly.
Right.
That stopped me in my tracks.
Right. It's a bold statement for sure.
Yeah.
And I think, the author's point is that we've become so obsessed with being polite.
Yeah.
With not offending anyone.
Totally.
That we've kind of lost touch with our own authenticity.
It's true.
A little bit.
And in that process, we silence ourselves.
Right.
We're so busy trying to fit in that we don't even stand out.
Exactly. It's like, where's that balance between, social harmony and personal integrity?
Right.
Where can we find that place where we can have those difficult conversations?
Yeah, where's that line?
And speak our truth, even if it might make other people a little uncomfortable.
Right. And speaking of uncomfortable.
Yeah.
This next idea is definitely one that I had to sit with for a minute.
Okay.
He says, we should assume that everyone is mentally insane.
Right. Which again, needs to be unpacked a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't think it's about literally, diagnosing everyone you meet.
No, of course not.
As being mentally ill.
Yeah.
But it's more of a thought experiment, right?
Totally.
It's about cultivating detachment.
Okay, so not insane, but maybe a little eccentric.
There you go, yeah.
A little flawed.
Flawed, exactly.
We're all human.
We are all human, absolutely.
We've got our own stuff.
We've all got baggage,
Right, exactly. And I think there's something to be said for, giving people a little bit of grace.
Totally.
And understanding.
And recognizing that other people's actions often say more about them than they do about us.
100%. And it's not about excusing bad behavior, but just having a little more compassion, I think, can go a long way.
Absolutely. And when we can approach all of our interactions with that understanding, it makes navigating those tricky social situations so much easier.
A lot smoother, for sure.
It really does.
So we've talked about physical and mental resilience. We've talked about embracing discomfort and challenging assumptions.
Right.
But what about our interactions with others?
Sure.
The source material also delves into the world of social dynamics.
Yeah.
And offers some really interesting insights into how we can navigate those relationships with wisdom and grace.
Right. I love that he talks about the importance of presenting ourselves to the world in a way that really reflects our inner strength and joy.
I love that.
It's
so true.
Really cultivating that outward appearance and demeanor that's aligned with our values and aspirations.
It's like fake it till you make it, but for your overall
totally, 100%. And what's so interesting about that
is
that there's actually some science behind this idea.
What?
Yeah. Studies have shown that our facial expressions and body language can actually influence our hormones and our neurotransmitters.
Wow.
Which in turn impact our mood, our energy levels, even our perception of pain.
So you're saying if I want to feel more joyful, I need to smile more.
There you go.
Interesting.
Right. It's like we have more power than we think we do.
I love it. And that kind of ties into this other thing that he talks about, which is the importance of living in accordance with nature.
Right.
Which isn't just about going on more hikes.
Yeah, exactly.
Although I am a fan.
It's about aligning ourselves with that natural order of things.
Right.
Recognizing that we are a part of something so much bigger than ourselves.
Okay. I like that. And that we have a responsibility to kind of do our part to contribute to that.
Absolutely. And what's so cool about that concept is that it can be applied to so many different aspects of our lives.
Yeah.
From our relationships with others, our relationship with the planet.
The environment, 100%.
It's really about finding that sense of harmony and balance in everything that we do.
Okay, so I love that because it really is about zooming out and getting that bigger picture of where we fit into all of this.
Exactly. And, it's not always easy, right?
Of course not.
We're human. We make mistakes.
Totally.
We get caught up in our own little dramas.
Every day.
But I think what the Stoics are trying to tell us is that by constantly striving to live in accordance with nature, by aligning ourselves with those universal principles of virtue, reason, self-control, we can ultimately achieve a state of inner peace.
And fulfillment.
Yes. Yeah, it's really about taking action,
Yes. And as we kind of wrap up this deep dive today, I'd love to bridge that gap from these big ideas to like what our listeners can actually do differently tomorrow.
Totally, because it's not just about, pondering these big concepts. It's about actually putting them into practice.
Exactly. Like, you remember that demigod ideal that we talked about?
Right.
It sounds kind of intimidating at first.
Yeah.
But it really is about just like pushing our own limits,
Absolutely.
both physically and mentally in ways that feel good to us.
Yeah, find what works for you. Right. Like, maybe you're not going to eat 20 pounds of meat, but...
Probably not.
But you can approach your workouts with that same level of dedication, discipline, commitment.
And that idea of discipline, I think, goes hand in hand with this other thing that he talks about, which is, cultivating an outward appearance and demeanor.
Right.
That reflects, our inner strength and joy.
Totally. And it's like, you're not just putting on a show for the world.
Right.
You're actually, signaling to your brain, like, hey, it's okay to feel good.
Interesting.
To embrace joy, even when things are tough.
It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way.
Totally. It is. And, I think what the Stoics believed is that, this outward expression of strength and virtue.
Yeah.
It wasn't just about personal well-being. It was also about setting an example for others.
I like that.
Like
paying it forward.
Yeah, inspiring those around you to kind of strive for excellence in their own lives.
And that our actions have ripple effects. The way that we show up in the world impacts other people.
100%. And that kind of brings us to, I think, another big takeaway from this deep dive, which is the importance of using our voices.
Yes.
Even in small ways.
To make a difference.
To make it different. Yeah, remember that suggestion about maybe starting a blog or a vlog?
It seems so simple at first.
Right.
But, I think in a world that feels really noisy and overwhelming sometimes, there's something really powerful about just like sharing our authentic selves.
I think so too.
And our experiences.
Yeah, and you never know. You know who needs to hear what you have to say.
You really don't.
So put it out there.
And it really speaks to that Stoic principle of recognizing our interconnectedness.
Yeah.
And that like even small acts of, sharing connection.
Like have a ripple effect.
Can totally make somebody's day.
100%.
And you know what that reminds me of?
What's that?
That idea that we should assume that everybody is mentally insane.
Right.
Which again, not literally.
Not literally, no.
Diagnosing anyone.
But approaching our interactions with just a little more understanding and compassion.
It's about giving people the benefit of the doubt, even when it's really hard.
Absolutely.
Even when they're acting kind of crazy.
And recognizing that hurt people hurt people.
That's so true.
Right.
Yes.
Like everyone's fighting a battle we know nothing about.
So true. And just like taking a breath before you react, I think is really powerful.
I think so too.
So we've talked about a lot today, and I think, it really comes back to this idea of like making conscious choices,
Yeah.
To like create a better experience both for ourselves and the people around us.
And that's really what it's all about, right?
Yeah, and that's what Stoicism is all about.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that we have that power to choose our responses.
Yes.
Even when things are hard.
It's very empowering.
Very empowering. Very empowering.
Well, for anybody who's listening and feeling inspired to learn more about this, obviously this was just kind of a starting point today.
A little taste.
The source material is incredible, and so we highly encourage you to check it out and continue exploring these ideas.
Yeah, I think the source material does a really good job at, like you said at the top of the show, of making these ancient ideas feel really accessible.
It does.
And relevant for our modern lives.
Well, on that note, I think that's our show for today.
All right.
But before we go, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought.
Okay.
We've talked a lot about the power of language, right?
Yes.
And how the words that we use shape the way we see the world.
Powerful, powerful stuff.
So powerful.
Yeah.
So here's a little challenge for you. You pay attention to the language that you're using.
Okay.
Both internally, with yourself, and how you talk to yourself.
Yeah.
And with others over the next couple of days.
I love it.
And notice how it makes you feel and how it impacts your interactions. If you don't love what you see, remember you have the power to change it.
There you go. Rewrite that story.
I love that.
So good.
Thanks for joining us on another deep dive.
See you next time.